Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 250. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, January the 8th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Podcast 250. Is this a benchmark? Maybe. If you figure I do about 50 podcasts a year, 45 to 50 podcasts a year, okay? And I started these podcasts about the time when I walked away from radio. Does that mean that I've been away from terrestrial radio for about 5 years? Maybe. I guess it does. But I wanted to make podcast 250 a little unique, but then I didn't want to deviate from the norm so much. So how do I do this differently? How do I make it special? How do I pick one topic that is going to cause the fan base to be riveted to the speaker for the 30 to 50 to 60 minutes that the podcast normally runs? I couldn't think of one particular idea, but what I did think of is a lot of different ideas. And in the past, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now in the world, in my life, etc. And I've done this in the past quite often, and I usually call this type of show, I call it potpourri. There's one problem with me calling the show potpourri. As I go through the ratings, historically, the lowest rated shows are entitled potpourri. So if I'm going to make podcast 250 a little special, maybe I need to brand it a little differently. Does that make sense? So I guess you could say this episode is going to be kind of a potpourri type thing, but we're not going to call it potpourri. We're calling it, what are we calling it? Jaguars, Black Homicides in St. Louis, and everything in between. Perhaps that that title, that entrance, that nomenclature on the front of the podcast is a little bit more appealing to you. Content will be the same, but it's in a bright, shiny box. How's that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the following topics. The Jaguar update that I've been working on, and big updates, big things going on. I wanted to share that with you folks today. The Baseball Lockout. We should be in the what they call the hot stove league right now, but we're not because baseball has been locked out, and I'm going to explain to you why that's a big deal, and moving forward, why it's not such a big deal, perhaps. We're going to talk about a podcast, Joe Rogan and Oliver Stone. Joe Rogan interviewed Oliver Stone recently on his podcast. I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it was a very interesting, very entertaining podcast. California Dave this morning. I turned on my computer before 4 o'clock this morning, and I saw an email from California Dave talking about California Assembly Bill number 1400. And it's about free healthcare in California. I'm going to talk about that. Restaurants, how you order food nowadays in restaurants. We're going to talk about the January 6th insurrection anniversary. We're going to talk about the racial makeup of murders in the city of St. Louis, and it's unbelievably skewed in one direction. Anyway, we're going to talk about all of the above in today's podcast. First, hang on. Coffee and water all ready to drink. First, let's start with the Jaguar update. Yesterday was a banner day for me, and it had to do with the progress that's being made on this Jaguar. As those of you know, as those of you who may not know, my father and I are in the process of restoring, used to be his, it's officially mine now, a 1951 Jaguar Mark VII that he had for about 60 years. It's been in his garage, not running, for about 55 years. It's now in my rented shop. Parts of it are being restored. Other parts are in a body shop being restored, a restoration shop. And the progress is really, really coming to fruition. That's probably not the right way to describe it, or the grammatically correct way to describe it, but we're making progress. How's that? Yesterday, I took a half day off work and went to see the guys at the shop that are doing the body work. I had to have a meeting with them because we had an estimate as to how much we thought this would cost. They shot me an estimate with the understanding that, hey, look, if we run into problems, it's going to be more. Okay, well, I get that. It's turning out to be a whole lot more. Let's just say that. And I needed some type of reason as to why this bill has been going through the roof, far more than I thought it was going to be. You expect something to be 5, 10, 15, even 20% higher than the estimate. When it approaches double, now we have a problem. So we had a meeting with the guys, and we wanted to take a look at the car. Basically, they told me, look, come look at where we have the car now before we talk, before you get upset about the money, because we're going to show you what we've done so far. And it's been several weeks, probably a month since I've been by there. Asked my father if he wanted to go. I always invite my father along, and he's up in years. Sometimes he has good days. Sometimes he has bad days. Yesterday, he had a good day, so he came along, and we saw the car. And while this thing is costing a king's ransom, friends, this car is, I don't want to be overly optimistic, but it's turning out to be better than new. The finish, the way the doors line up, the way the rust has been repaired. I'd like to say to like new condition, but this thing is better than new. And that's why I took it to these guys, because I wanted it done right. It's certainly being done right. We're talking about ways to trim some cost here and there, and I think they're working with me. They're good guys. They're doing a good job. I've saved a ton of money because I'm doing a lot of the restoration myself as well. I took everything apart off that car and gave him basically a shell. After he's done with his work, I'm putting everything back together and getting that thing running myself with help, I'm sure. But anyway, it's turning out to be very cool. And when you see an old car come out of a garage that's been sitting unattended for 55 years, and you see it actually starting to come to life, actually starting to take a shape or a form where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, you get excited. So that's what we did yesterday. And my dad was just beyond happy. He teared up, and he actually said, I never thought this would happen. This is a dream come true. That statement alone is making this whole thing well worth it. The guys did take the placard off the car for me. Well, they had to take it off because they're doing all the paint work and all that. And when you read a placard on these old cars, all cars have placards. Generally, they're on the, where are most cars? Maybe on the door jamb. Tells you where it's made. It tells you tire pressure, a couple little things. Doesn't really tell you much, okay? Back then, they told you a lot. Basically, the hand-stamped placard that's on this car, when I say hand-stamped, they didn't run this through a computer because there were no computers in 1951, okay? They stamped the chassis number, the body number, the engine number, the gearbox number onto this car. And when I say they stamped it, some guy took a hammer and a set of number and letter stamps and physically stamped this thing on. And didn't spend too much time making sure the letters were straight. It talks about the type of oil that you need to use in this car, on the vacuum system, on the rest of the car. It even goes into brands of oil that you use and the type of oil you need to use if it's a brand. It just doesn't say 5W30, okay? And we recommend Castrol. because Castrol paid us money to say that, okay? What it does is it shows, okay, the oil that you use, Castrol XL, Castrol Light, Castrol XXL. That's what they show for viscosity. I guess they didn't have viscosity back then. For shell, double shell, single shell, or triple shell. Also, Esso-Lube. I guess that's kind of mobiles, I guess. Esso-Lube 30, Esso-Lube 20, or Esso-Lube 40. Now, that would be the viscosity, okay? And it has different viscosities, 20, 30, and 40. 20 is what you use in the summertime. I'm sorry, 30 is what you use in the summertime for viscosity. 20 is what you use in the wintertime. I'm old enough to remember cars used to be that way. They didn't have the multi-viscosity oil. You used a different viscosity in the summer or the winter. Now, if you're in a tropical climate, you use 40 weight oil. Esso-Lube 40. They talk about the gearbox oil that you use, the brand of, you can use multiple brands. Here's the what do you want to say, the type on the brand that you use in the rear axle, in the steering box. They even talk about the different oils that you use on the wheel hubs, for all things. Valve clearance, because this old car has mechanical valves. They didn't have hydraulic valves. Valves weren't self-adjusting then. This valve is actually, they're adjusted by a shim that you put between the valve stem and the tappet, okay? You physically put a shim there to adjust the valve clearance. And the exhaust valves, 6,000ths. That's the included shim clearance. On the exhaust, 8,000ths. And those numbers were was it that right? Let me look again. Yeah, 6,000ths on the intake, 8,000ths on the exhaust. And you figure, well, why did they have to hand stamp that? Because, friends, all these motors were different. Every motor was different. And on this particular one, it required 6,000ths clearance on the intake valves and 8,000ths clearance on the exhaust valves. This car is so different from anything we have nowadays that I'm happy as a little girl just thinking about it. So good news on the Jaguar, big day on the Jaguar, progress being made, and Dad's smiling ear to ear, which makes it even that much better. Number 2, the Baseball Lockout. I'm a pretty big sports fan. And when I say that, I'm almost a passive sports fan when it comes to most sports. I'm a bit more of a passive fan. I'm more of an active fan when it comes to baseball, more of a passive fan when it comes to most other sports. Yeah, I'll watch them when they're on, but it's something to do. Baseball, however, is different. I've always been a baseball fan. Baseball has always been the American pastime, the game that I really understood, the thing I really understood and enjoyed. And there's no baseball news. In fact, I'll tell you how little baseball news there is. The announcer for the St. Louis Cardinals on Fox Sports Midwest, it's now called Bally Sports, Bally's, a gambling company. A gambling company is the company that airs the baseball games. Tell that to Pete Rose, who's locked out of the Hall of Fame because he was involved in gambling. But that's another story for another day. Dan McLaughlin, who was the play-by-play guy on Bally Sports Midwest, okay, he had a 1-hour show Monday through Friday on the local ESPN station here in St. Louis. He's not on that show anymore. And basically, he explained the reason he's not on that show. He said, look, I'm a baseball guy. I talk about baseball. When people listen to my show, they want to hear about baseball. And friends, there is absolutely nothing to report. So there's no need for me to have a show. And they took him off and they put somebody else on, which was a good move, actually. How little is going on with these baseball negotiations? Well, as you probably know, the players are locked out. The owners have locked out the players. The theory behind this is, okay, we've locked you out. So now that gives you a reason to hurry up and come